is to have empathy for the other. So that's empathy for the self, the individual, empathy for the other, the environment. He says, as a result of that, growth of that empathy, what you need to do is to create an observation. And the observation can be seen as that black ribbon. It has to be an observation that both sides agree that they have seen. It has to be inclusive of both sides. So you keep talking it through until you find the observation that's common to both. Then, as a result of that observation, which comes out of doing, it moves around to the celebrating what is the feeling that is arising as a result of that observation. How does that observation create that feeling? And then, from that feeling, it requires a lot of conceptual thought, a lot of thinking. Because the thinking is what enables you to see through those feelings what needs are not being met. What are the unmet needs in the situation? And once you've expressed and explained the unmet needs, the last step, which is the translation from the planning to the doing, is you make a request. You make a request for a change. And the person, the participants, have the power to refuse the request. But if they have the power to refuse the request, what you have to do is to return again to the observation. And so there is the 4 steps of Marshall Rosenberg built into Dragon Dreaming itself. It's interesting how it happened, because I was staying with Joanna and Macy at her house in California, in San Francisco, Berkeley, California. And Joanna came to me and said, John, would you mind not coming into the salon? She said, because I'm meeting someone, I know about his work, I've admired it for a long time, but this is the very first time I've ever met him. Would you mind staying in the kitchen? And I said, yes, that's fine, I'll stay in the kitchen. And I was there, and within 20 minutes, suddenly the door between the kitchen and the salon opened up, and Joanna called me into the room, and it was with Marshall Rosenberg. And it was interesting that Marshall was what he was talking about, because he said that he was creating international centres for non-violent communication around the world. And what he said he was doing, he was trying to use sociocracy as a method for creating these centres for non-violent communication. And he said that what was happening was these centres were fighting among each other. The centres of non-violent communication in Sweden were having arguments with the centres for non-violent communication in Germany. And he asked Joanna, did she know of a method for planning that was able to create a consensus, like a way of being able to work forward? And Joanna said, well, there's a strange Australian in the next room. And so I did a brief explanation in a session with Marshall about Dragon Dreaming. And he did a session with the person I was travelling with, who was having difficulty communicating with her father. And it was just so magical watching him do it. The second time I met Marshall was just before he died at the Orchidea in Switzerland. he used to come to run workshops in Switzerland quite often. And it was New Year's Eve, and there was snow this deep in the mountains in Switzerland. And Marshall led the session, and then he got me to lead a dragon dreaming session for the participants up there in the mountains. So there is a connection between non-violent communication and the power of that, as you say, about bringing Palestinians and Israelis together. Marshall also did the non-violent communication reconciliation between the people in Nigeria as a result of the civil war with the Igbo. And it's incredibly powerful. The other thing too that I would just say briefly is there is a British man who married a Brazilian and moved to Brazil. And he was unable to get a work visa in Brazil. And so what he was doing, he was going into the favelas,
The slums.
where the poorest of the poor live. And he was just sitting there and reading with the children. Because in those days, the Brazilian police were conducting a war against quote unquote drugs. And there was a lot of children being killed. And this Englishman, I'm trying to remember his name for a second, it will come to me possibly. He sent a message and invited Marshall to come to Brazil. And Marshall came to Brazil and said, "Where is the workshop you want me to lead?" And this guy said, "No, I am the workshop. I want you to teach me everything personally that you know about nonviolent communication." And so this Englishman took Marshall into the favelas. And they were just sitting on the steps in front of houses and started engaging the children there in communication. And out of that came the skill of what they call restorative justice. Restorative justice is a way of bringing the perpetrator of a crime together face to face with the victims of the crime, and through a mediated process based on nonviolent communication, to get each side to communicate from within themselves, their own personal situation, what has happened and what they feel about it. And what they've discovered with restorative justice is the people who have committed the crimes never commit another crime. It's a system that's spread now right around the world. So, it is possible